Hi, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 1, where we talk about audiobooks and regular books and get you interested. And I'm Frank Perrine.
Cody Decker.
Today, we're going to be going over a book called Wolfen.
This is like a detective noir werewolf book?
Yeah. And I don't even know if, well, I can't say
not noir, not detective noir.
But it is classic to an old detective kind of story. It's really well done. It's an older book, so a lot of people out there might remember the movie Wolfen, which kind of sucked. But but you'll I would definitely. It's a high read. It's good, really good book.
I really started getting into it, and I was like listening to it at night. And I just got it, like really like set me in this mood where I'm like, this is actually very creepy.
Yeah, yeah, and it's creepy, because we're gonna go over the whole book. There's not too much of a spoiler. It is what it is. But the werewolves have been with man forever, so they go into the werewolves actually communicating with each other, and they do things to lure humans. And that's creepy.
That was the best part about that book, was just like, I loved like the mindset, because it doesn't just go like, oh yeah, they just think in like full sentences either. No. You understand like, oh, this is how their minds work, and it is different than a human's. And then like just how like, because sometimes the ambush is from their perspective, sometimes it's from the humans, and sometimes you'll get both.
Right.
And it is just like when characters realize like, oh.
Yeah.
If I went into that room, I'd be dead.
I'm gonna die.
And they do like, oh, like mimic the sounds of someone crying, and just how someone will be like, no, there's someone there. It's just like it was really like that, like suspense thriller, and they're like, we're being hunted, and they're not dumb, they are smart, and
they even know the difference between male and female, so they know that females will be more lured to the sound of a baby crying. So they mimic babies crying to lure women to get killed, or in this case, lure our character into going one way. So they're planning to ambush the other character another way. Yeah, it's amazing. It was really good.
I like it, and it's a straightforward plot too. There isn't like a. It's not like, oh, like you'll finish the story later. There's a lot of like elements out there in the war and stuff that you get, but it's not like, oh, but what's going to happen when the big thing? It is like there's a werewolf issue happening, and here's two cops dealing with it in this, like, you sent me pictures of like, it's Detroit. Is that?
It's actually the Bronx in New York.
The Bronx
during the 80s, and during that time, they would the owners would burn down the buildings for the insurance money. So you would have whole blocks, and I saw it in person when you'd have whole blocks of burned out buildings. It looked like a bomb went off as far as you could see.
And for the werewolves in this, they're not werewolves, they're like lichen or wolf. Well, they're wolfen.
It's unique because they don't really. It's not your typical werewolf. They did something totally different, where this species has been around since man, and so it's its own species. And our folklore has come from our interaction in the past with these creatures, which I found amazing.
Yeah,
I thought that was such a.
It's always like for any fantasy thing, like one of the challenges you always see them talk is, how do you address, like, if you're going to take in modern times, why do we have it in our lore, in our like real stories, if it is actually real too? So it's like, oh yeah, like they saw this, they assumed they could shape, which is like, I mean, that's how it came in our place. Like, they just saw like hairy people or whatever, and I guess probably turns into a wolf or something.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's almost like two stories going on at once. And you have, these police people, and they're kind of in a relationship or had a relationship, and then the
very believable and emotional too.
It was, and almost to the point where you don't really know what really happened to them.
Yeah,
but it sucked.
Yeah. When it gets to that part, and they go in their relationship, I'm just like, it didn't work out, huh?
Yeah. and then to the Wolfen part of it. Even where they know that certain people in their pack are better climbers or better this. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just and they go into what I found amazing was that the head of the Wolfen group and just their thought process and knowing, that I have to give up this to save this. So it totally changes, I think, kind of the aspect of what you think as a werewolf.
Yeah, I think this was the most interesting thing of having it takes place from a monster's perspective. Because like by the end of it, I'm like, oh, that's that's a respectable move that monster made.
Yeah,
and they get even when I'm like, oh, but the other ones are like just dumb monsters. But then the other ones will be like, I get what they did. They sacrificed their dignity for the good of the pack, and I'm like, yeah, and everyone's pretty reasonable with these werewolves here.
Yeah, and I mean to the point where you kind of feel bad.
And it's like, oh, it's not even this pack's fault that this is happening. No. And because it is like, oh, like monsters hiding in the shadows for centuries.
Yeah.
This does be like, yeah, eventually someone's going to slip up.
Right.
And that's the premise of this is two wolves basically they didn't do what they were supposed to do to maintain the masquerade.
Yeah.
And
two teenage wolves.
Two
young wolves.
And it's kind of like that was going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
Especially, and then it's just like the premise of it is two cops just get ambushed in an alley and eaten,
right?
And then two other cops are investigating it, and they're like pretty believably come to the conclusion that this is a mystical situation
because they find like hair and footprints that don't make any sense because it's like I think and stuff. So they make cast of them and stuff like that, and they think dogs. They think wild dogs have attacked these two cops in the junkyard.
Yeah, which everyone is like, wild dogs, really?
Yeah.
I don't believe, they're like, wild dogs killed it. And I like, too, like, a professional who, like, he sees the evidence of the bodies. He's like, oh, this was not a wild dog. I'm not going to say what all the evidence points to because I will lose my job.
Yes.
And I fully believe that as, like, a thing. Because everyone's like, come on, just say it. He's like, I'm not going to say what I think this is.
Yeah.
Because I'll go to a mental ward.
And his demise is pretty awesome. I gotta say, but
the way it shows these people being hunted, it had attention throughout the whole story, and then they're like, even the guy's like, I'll just shoot them if they come at you, and then you realize like, oh yeah, like they're not gonna let that happen either.
Yeah, and they're like super fast, so that's to keep their secret and make sure no one knows who they are, what they are. So
and they form their nests in these abandoned buildings in the Bronx, right? That's like the.
Yeah, they don't really go into too much where their nesting is, but I know that's where they hunt.
Oh yeah, because they hunt
people that are not going to be missed. Drug addicts, different things like that wouldn't be missed in society.
I really liked when it talks about that part too, because they're like, yeah, when humans started expanding, the amount of people that humans stopped caring about grew so big that we actually got to hide more.
Right.
And that's all. I like that also as far as explaining like, well, why did people see them in the past, but now we don't see them in the present?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, they don't have to even show up at all anymore.
No.
They can just eat all the homeless people that no one is ever going to think about and just be set for life. Like they don't have to like risk anything. The only reason anything got risked, it was two teens who were like, who cares?
Yeah. And it's interesting because they even like smell like bad lungs or bad or bad body organs, and be like, okay, yeah, we're gonna eat this guy, but not eat that.
I like that too, where they talk about where it's like, yeah, they're not the smartest, they're not on human level of intelligence, but if an ape had the senses of a dog,
right? And they even mentioned that in there.
Yeah. And I really like that, like talking about like. I think like handling monster intelligence is usually they just go, you see a story and it's like, oh, like somehow that monster knows how doors works, it knows how this works.
But where I kind of, I don't like disagree, but I mean in the end where the alpha, Wolfen is doing his thing for the protection and the further of his family, that's pretty intelligent.
Yeah. And what I liked about how it handled it is it was like an intelligent, thoughtful thing, but they still don't have him say like in his mind full sentences.
Correct.
It's a believable that like this is like you're given a window into the way this animal is thinking. It's not being anthropomorphized completely.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to get bleeped out. I'm going to bleep that out, and I'm just going to say that I said it right.
I would just put it on the bottom.
Okay, yeah.
Just put the word on the bottom.
Yeah, just right here. Maybe it'll sparkles or something.
That's what I would do. that whenever we blow it, you're just going to see our frame of our face and the actual word we meant to say.
Yeah, no, the monster intelligence I think is the highlight of going through this, especially for someone who wants to like have anything takes place from a monster's perspective.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, it's not that long of a read either.
No, this was
super simple.
Definitely something I'm adding to my October listen list.
Yeah, and it's funny. I started this, and I had heard that way back when I used to listen to cassette tapes.
Yeah, cassette. We'll show a picture of it. Yeah, we'll have it.
I used to listen on cassette tapes, and I listened to this book multiple times. I think I listened to it total back in the 90s, or probably about 6 times. I just really, really enjoyed it. And then it's funny, we started this, and I thought, I just remembered it. I was on YouTube. I'm like, oh my goodness, we need to read this book. Now, if you happen to see the movie, I kind of get it. When the movie was made, how are you going to take what's in the book and put it in the movie, and you just can't. So you have actually wolves in the movie when in the book they're not. They're more like they're more like a humanoid creature where they're mistaken for dogs because they could walk
they crawl on all fours and it looks like a mangy dog because they're kind of like.
But they talk about their face kind of looks. It's not like a muzzle, so it's a really interesting description of them. And I think, I mean, I would totally, it doesn't matter Halloween, doesn't matter when. I would definitely give this book a shot. So I'll enjoy it.
I also like listening to it. I was like, I don't know. I don't think you can translate this into a movie because so much of it is in like their thought process. And when I listen to a book or, maybe I'll read sometimes, I am like, how could they do this in a movie? And usually and it's like, they would just you either get subtitles or you just have to say like, no, they just talk like humans to each other. Yeah, because like it's very fun the way it's shown, but it's like I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, like even I mean, not that it's off subject, but according to like a movie, you could watch Jaws is one of the most iconic movies. Everyone loves Jaws, but I'm listening to the book right now, which I've never listened to, and I'm like, there's a lot more. A lot more to it.
Do you get like the sharks like thoughts?
No, but a lot of the things that are happening between him and his wife. His wife kind of has a thing for the shark guy, and it's really interesting.
Is it one of those things where it's like a character like in a visual media just has to go like okay, and then but in the book they're like that was given a whole paragraph of like when he said okay. That's what I found in Goblin Slayer. The character barely says anything, and in the novel. It's just like they just go into like here's how he actually feels, and I'm like, oh yeah, I missed out on all that.
Yeah.
So there's a whole relationship drama in Jaws. I didn't.
Yeah, I'm in it right now, and I was like, I don't remember that dinner scene.
I don't think they interact. I don't remember them interacting at all.
Yeah, and well, I remember in the movie they show kind of parts where you think that maybe he might have for him, but this is like downright where.
Oh.
Yeah, flirting with it. Different things like that. And he's getting pissed off about it. Which then, when you think about the movie, some of his reactions to him make sense. So, but that's for another podcast.
Now, if this was a straight adaptation and they somehow managed to figure out how to do that monster thing, this is like, this is it's a very pleasant, easy, like spooky story that like I would have no problem now. With CGI?
I think with CGI now, it would be phenomenal because these things, there's a part in the book where they know now that somebody knows that there's something out there. So that's these two cops. So they're tracking them on the roofs because it talks about how they don't even notice the shadows that are jumping off roof to roof, tracking where they're going, who they're seeing, and anyone who they see, then they're a target. So there's a part where they pick their best climber. And he climbs like 7 to 10 stories and tries to get in her house.
The one where it's like by the window, and then you get her being like, she like knows there's something by the window. Just classic horror. Like,
that's great. And she looks out there and sees the shape, and then I think they could adapt it now to him. But I think it's just but it's just a good. I liked it a lot. How did you like it? Because I know that you had never heard about it.
I had a rough start going in. it passed the chapter 1 the chapter 1 test. I don't know. I have that thing. If as long as I'm slightly interested by the end of the first chapter, I'm going through the whole book.
Gotcha.
That's all they have to do.
Hopefully not like the listeners.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know how I feel because I've never done a detective story. I've never done.
And it kind of takes that old school kind of detective. You know, she walked in the room.
Yes, and I got into it, and then I just remember when it started, like when it got to them when they're in the or the building, and they're trying to like get them to separate.
Yeah.
I just remember like just being like, oh, like I felt the chills. I'm like, oh, I'm in this story. Like it really got me into it.
And especially I liked the kind of, you know, Sin City kind of cop kind of, you know, he reminded me of this old school kind of guy that just, man, never took care of himself, but he's just a tough hombre, right? And when they're trying to separate him, he doesn't even know what it is. And he's like, we just need to get the F out of here.
Yeah.
I know, I have a feeling of what's going on. We need to leave. And then it's kind of cool because it goes into the Wolfen, their side of it, like, shit.
Yeah.
Man, why did you let her separate? I mean, it's kind of crazy.
There was interesting comedy bits where where basically they're just like, that was it. That was our whole. It was so creepy from the human's perspective, and then you're given the Wolfen's perspective, and it's just like that's
what we do.
Yeah,
yeah.
I
mean, even to the point where the I think it's one of the brothers that's making the baby sounds is so proud of how he can make a baby sound just like a baby, and it goes in that. Remember how he's like, it made it sound so good. It's like it's a trip. It's a trip, and that. In the movie, that's kind of weird because you hear this baby in this abandoned building, and you're like, you know. But
now, in your head, for the perfect adaptation, would it sound like an actual baby, or would it sound like a kind of like a monstrous twist of a baby scream?
Well, I think in the book, if you remember, the way that they were talking about, it sounded like it really wasn't
that uncanny.
It was more. Going after a female's perspective of safety. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so the way that the writer explained it, I don't know if it would be an actual baby sound or it would sound like something else. And maybe that's why he didn't buy it. Because remember, he goes, that is not that. So I think it's something subconscious, which is even more scary.
Yeah, and that does go into that's one of those things I like about the uncanny valley, where people are like, why do humans have like this, like not even just like a sense for it, but like a kind of disgust when we see or hear something that is human but not quite. Like, why does that like upset you? You know. And you know, I like that as like, oh, were there human mimics? Like, I think the actual answer is like, especially for the uncanny valley, it's because that's what a dead body looks like.
Yeah.
So like, there's an instinctual thing of like, well, if you're near a dead body, you'll get diseases. Whatever killed that might come after you. So if you see something, if you see them, the only thing in nature, unless there is a supernatural thing, it would be a dead body.
Yeah. You know, like back in the day, they would stick bricks.
I didn't know about the bricks.
Actually, all sorts of just to make sure that. Yeah. So, but that's another.
We'll get to that. Don't worry. There's a lot of uncanny valley stories I'm into.
But what's cool about it, and I don't know if I want to ruin it for anyone reading it. Of the past, but I'll let you guys read it because I mean it's that part. Totally, I loved it.
Is that where they talk about how like other supernatural creatures came to be? Yeah, I like it. I like that, and I think that's not spoilery.
Oh, okay.
Especially because this is this version, because their version of werewolves is already so different,
right? So
they have their version of vampires, right?
Yeah, and it's not a vampire at all. So what had happened was the one scientist, that guy that's been helping them, he made a cast of the foot and he's now obsessed with these creatures, and he goes back to this old library and they pull out this crazy book and it has the picture of one of them that he's seen, And it explains that how man used to communicate with these things through these hand gestures, and that they would have a communicator with them in their pack that was human. And he would lure out people for them to kill, and he would be able to communicate. And then when they were done eating, then he would eat. Hence where we got the whole vampire thing. So they would travel with these groups of Wolfen and basically be, vulture, I guess, eating what's left over. But that's where the vampire thing comes from.
And that's something I really like in fantasy stories. Is
I loved it.
when they have an actual ecosystem, because nothing upsets me more than when a giant monster chases a human, and I'm just like, well, they wouldn't do that because there's no reason for them to eat something that small.
Or when you come across this gigantic monster with all canine teeth, and you got like 85 of them, and you're thinking, how are you surviving?
Well, yeah. What are
you feeding?
This has to eat so much, and then like one person, like the whole pack, like the energy that they expend to chase one person is like, well, they would just die off in a week.
Oh yeah, they'd starve to death. I don't know. I always think about that stuff, especially when you have like movies where they enter a planet. Prime example would be the alien species. So the alien species left alone by itself on a planet doesn't make any sense.
It would just
you would end up with a bunch of eggs, just like you did on the other.
They go into they're in like a hibernative.
Yeah, because you would run out of host.
Yeah, is that why they went into like, oh, it's like a bioweapon? Because I feel like they changed the lore of aliens.
So. Well, it all. I mean, what really makes sense is the whole alien versus predator substory through the comics. So, in that aspect, the predators were using aliens as support. So they would put them on a planet, they would start replicating, and then they would send their people down to support hunt. That made sense. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
I liked Alien versus Predator, by the way, but I preferred in Predator how like the idea was sort of like this is just their version of a guy going hunting.
Yes.
I don't like I that's something that upsets me every time they're like, oh yeah, their entire race acts exactly like the first one you were shown.
Yeah.
I liked the idea where they left. It was like some of them go out and do this. They have this the reason like they have this, it's using this advanced because it was all like a metaphor. Like this is what hunting is like from a deer's perspective. Camouflage, long range weapons. You don't know what they do. Skin them alive, and you're like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, for fun.
Do it now.
That was good. Yeah. I liked Alien versus Predator, and I just do not like that they made their entire race hunters.
Well, it's funny. Even the one with I think it's Alien Predator 2, Danny Glover.
The Concrete Jungle.
Concrete Jungle. Now, I didn't really like that too much. I like some of the places that they filmed, but I mean, most people might agree with me. But I mean, one of the best parts of that movie was seeing the alien skull.
That's what started it all, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone was like, "Can you imagine?" And they're like, "Well, here it is." And I was,
that was amazing. It was like ultimate to me. I was just like, "Oh my gosh," But we can go back now. Let's go back to Wolfen. So, I mean, if you really want to be disappointed with them, no, I'm just kidding.
No,
you could watch the movie. You could watch the movie, but the book, like I said, it's a fast read. It's easy. You could do it while I did it while I was driving, to work and back.
This is a 2-day book.
Yeah, easy. And like I said, some of the things that are in there are really rewarding. I mean, because I think the author probably, and I don't even think I've read anything else from this author. But the author does so many like kind of just things that are different. He didn't really cookie cut a werewolf story.
Yeah.
He didn't have the Fabio that turns into a werewolf that still feels for the girl and he's fighting that inner turmoil.
I'm the hunter of the pack, but now that I've seen her, I don't know how I feel.
Yeah, it was basically, this was a species on its own that just aligned itself with man. It had nothing to do with the folklore. The folklore was created by this alien, by this split and evolutionary, running.
Yeah,
and it's its own species. It's not an alien. It didn't come from outer space. It is an intelligent creature that lives amongst us, and it has its own, interactions with each other, and even every city. Like the story that tells you about a family in this city, but it wasn't even, like you said, it wasn't even their fault. It was two younger Wolfen from another city that came and killed these two guys.
Yeah, now it's like it's their pack's responsibility to clean it up because this is their territory, and you are, right. And they do show like they are like sympathetic in the way that like they're not evil. They just eat people.
Yeah, and that's what's unique about it, because it's not. They understand they have to hide. They understand they don't want to go back to where everyone knows what they are and being hunted. They refer to that like back in the old days, and where we had to hide and so in the end they know if these people find out that they exist, that it's done, and they'll be hunted. They'll find a way to take them out, and
do they talk about it? Because like I do remember this feeling of like, yeah, they're like the race is kind of aware that they are on a timer as like humans keep advancing, and there is this like, there is this sense of like we already had a huge slip up here. The next time it happens, we're not going to be able to hunt them down individually. Yeah, there's this sense of like we are like dying off.
Yeah, and it's pretty interesting because I mean, it would be cool if someone can recreate. Maybe I'll draw it sometime and put it out for you guys, because I mean, to me, I think, like I said, it's a good book. If you want to do it at night, do it at night. I mean, I like how that the two cops, they have their own issues, but they know they're being hunted. And that's the part that I was tripping out on. Yeah, because they knew that they were being hunted by these things, and even there's a part where he is sitting there waiting in an alley, and he wants to make sure he doesn't fall asleep, and he's protecting this lady, and he wakes up and he sees him, and he's going for his gun as fast as possible, and you're like in it, you're like, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden you realize that they saw him like 20 minutes ago. Yeah, they smelt him. They could have killed him at any point. And he thought that he had the upper hand. That part was cool. I think that might be like my favorite scene. That was really as far as like like the detective, especially that idea of that shot of like he like wakes up and like they're just staring at him. Yeah. And the reason they were across the street. Yeah, and they're like they've been following the whole time. Yeah. They're not even worried about it. They're just like, well, okay, how do we handle this? Because we can't like open the door. Yeah. So, but it's just like he thinks that's when you and he realize this is a way bigger threat than you think. Right. And you're in a very small city. They can smell you. They never lost your scent. They know exactly where you are at all times. It's just a matter of getting you alone. And they just got him alone. Yeah. But like I said, you're like, oh my goodness. And then you find out the other side of it from the Wolf's aspect. And you're like, really? I mean, that part, it was so cool to me. It was almost like a person's different perspective. And most of the time in books or movies, it's kind of left up to you to make those ideas and make you to formulate those thoughts. But I like how they actually did it for you, but didn't ruin it. Didn't make it seem like you're an idiot. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really played it really well, where it was just kind of surprising. It was cool. And then you want more of it. You don't really get a lot too much to the very end. I thought it was a perfect balance. Yeah. There's stories I'll go to. I'm like, I don't really want this side of the story. I want the one I came in here for. Yeah. But this one I was like, it really was like, as soon as I felt like I haven't gotten one perspective in a bit, it would change, and it's like, well, here's them doing their thing. And it was fun to get like you get half the story each time, and you go like, yes. And here's what the creepy scratch that she heard on the window was it like being like, I know that I can do this. I have to get in here. Window's closed. Am I going to be able to do this? It reminded me a bit of you watched The Thing. Yes, of course. There was a short story someone wrote. The OG or Carpenter? Carpenter. Oh, the best. Yeah, it was one of my favorite movies. No, every Halloween I have to watch it. No offense on the original, but it was a space carrot, I think they said. But someone wrote a short story from The Thing's perspective. Oh, that'd be interesting to read. It's very creepy too, and it pulls it off in an alien way, and it shows how like
And it, like, there's a scene in the thing where it, like, when it's first discovered, it just screams at him, right? Yeah. And you are like, that's not what you would do if it was there to, like, kill them. So, like, it offers this, like, interpretation of what it was doing.
Like, it's being attacked.
Yes. And it's called, you know what it's called? What? The Things. Because it refers to, because it doesn't even understand, it is really interesting. And I don't think this will ruin it. But it is just like this bit of from its perspective where it talks about like, oh, there's a tumor in this thing's skull, and it's like going like, oh, like there's no connection between each other. Like these must be the loneliest, and like you realize like, oh, it doesn't even know what a human brain is, and so like there's a part where it like realizes like, oh, I just killed this thing, because it's an alien. So I really like the idea of like, yeah, it's not.
That's pretty cool.
It's not evil. It doesn't even understand what we are. It doesn't understand that you wouldn't even want it to happen to you. And like
from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's very good. Check out The Things. It's on YouTube. I know that for sure.
I definitely will. You know, in the end, and you know what the cool thing about this book is, it doesn't leave you like saying, "Oh, there's got to be another book."
Yeah,
it just leaves you good. I mean,
the situation ended. I'm like, they told me about the war. They told me about the story. You know, like either, you know, it is kind of like, yeah, they're gonna keep hiding in the shadows.
Yeah,
they don't know. This probably can't continue. But it's not like the detective goes like, now I'm coming to them.
No, but that's the thing. They already know, the brother and sister already know that it's not, because they leave the mom and the dad's body there for discovery. And in the end, they howl and realize that it starts happening in all these cities because they're pretty much done.
Yeah.
Their whole species is done, because now they had to leave their mom and dad in this apartment that these people were holding down to try to, you know, board doors up and everything to get away from these. And they realize they got to leave them. So they really broke the biggest rule, because they're not actually supposed to leave any of the body. They're supposed to eat it. Remember, they devour it.
Like all of it, everything.
So in the end, the mom's left there, and I think the brother or somebody else. So the sister, and they know that that's pretty much, this is going to be the end of their species.
And it felt like it was all like believable, especially as like you know, and this was like, what, they've never slipped up. They slipped up once, and it is like, yeah, it's over.
Yeah.
This is the story where they slipped up.
Yeah.
And yeah, once humans do find out, it is, even the monsters are like, oh, that was it. That was all we had.
That's all we had. And it was funny because it's weird, because they're totally different type of species. Because you would figure, well, why don't some of the other cities send some of their top-notch people over? But it was their responsibility, because it was in their territory.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I don't remember thinking there was ever a plot hole or any issue. No, because if you do think like, well, that was dumb of them, it was. They failed.
Yeah,
it was dumb that they operated that way, and you're like, oh, that couldn't last forever. It couldn't.
Right.
And it is like, yeah, humans. I'll tell you what, humans would have handled that much better.
And it was and. In that thought process, it's great, because they've operated that way for forever, and with the new things, and they even talk about that, the skyscrapers, all these different things. You know, I think the dad originally, he was worried about because they've slipped up before and they've had to fix it, and it was you almost had that feeling like you said, that eventually, you know, the gig's up.
Yeah. It's like, it's a horror story from the human's perspective, and it's a tragedy from the Wolfen's perspective.
That's a good way to put it.
And that's why, like, every time it switches, you're like getting a different element here, because they're worried about their lives. They're worried about their entire species.
Yeah. Really, I would highly recommend it. And like I said, it's not a long read. And like I said, it doesn't leave you going, oh, where's book 2?
Yeah.
I mean, it ends perfect to me. I didn't think of it. I actually listened to it 3 times already, but since then. But
and it is one of those ones where it does feel like, well, because you get the human side and then the Wolfen side. So like on a re-listen, are you kind of like, now that you know both sides, like going in again, is it like a little more enjoyable?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because every time I reread a book or anything like that, listen to a book again, I'm always trying to get something new out of it. So I'll try to look at it from a different perspective. So I'll listen to it from the wolf's perspective, and then for the man's perspective, and then what the writer was kind of thinking in certain aspects of it, and those things make the book more enjoyable to me. Like what you said, that so encapsulates their tragedy. No, I mean, that was great, because I mean that's how I felt about the book.
That's why both sides felt equally entertaining.
Yeah,
because it's not like in Jaws when you get the shark's perspective, that's to make it like creepy,
right?
But when you get the Wolfen's perspective, you're like, oh, I get what's happening now.
Yeah.
They really need this to happen for them to keep going, and they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And you
the part where they blame the dad.
That was definitely brutal. I mean, easily the best written monster scene I've ever seen.
So brutal.
And it's just like, it was so sad, and I'm like on the dad werewolf side.
Yeah, but then the his wife or the mom, she understands. And she thinks he's kind of weak, but she understands why he did it. I mean, it was crazy.
This was the thing where it's like, definitely experience it for yourself. But I think we could talk about how it's handled as far as there's a pack mentality, and the dad is kind of like, I have to submit to let the next gen take over, and then they're basically just give him completely disrespect him. But then also and then I'm like, oh, that poor dad werewolf. And then you get the other family's perspective, and it is they're like basically just like, what a man to let that happen to him.
And it's really interesting, and the dad's perspective is really great, because he not only is looking at as a pack mentality, he's also looking at the further saving of his whole race.
But all the
part of what he's doing is because of that, and he knows he has to do it, but he's hoping that he's only doing it because it hopefully save his whole race of people.
I really had the sense of this dad werewolf has so much pressure on him.
I know,
and he's doing everything he can to save his family, to save his species. And
now the only thing that I wish they could have got more into, I don't know, maybe not, maybe it's just me after listening to it a few times, but is the inner problems with the dad and the kids and the
you would have you think it would have now that I'm thinking about that, are you saying to show their degradation of the pack falling apart?
Why was the son so pissed off? It sounded like he was pissed off for a long time. It wasn't just a now thing.
I would have liked to see. I love the detectives, and I love the relationship they had, where it was just nothing's really gonna happen.
No, but it's funny, they both want it to happen. That's what's weird.
It's just this believable, really human moment they have, where they're just we might die right now, you know, and the guy detective is just I just want you to know how I feel, even though I know nothing's gonna happen, and I'm like, God,
and you could just picture typical old-fashioned guy in the cheesy suit with a bad tie, drinks too much, I mean, you could just picture that guy. That rough dude, and that's the character.
Which I was also like, oh, I get why he drinks, because I know what he's going through. It's not like he drinks because he's just a hard-boiled detective. I'm like, dude, take that shot, man.
And I kind of I know it sounds weird, but I kind of like that they did it like that. I mean, I do. I just think it almost kind of brought me into that whole kind of way that the whole story then started rolling forward. It's just. Yeah, I highly recommend it, and just send us stuff and tell us what you think, because like I said, it's an older book. Not a lot of people know of it.
No, and this is a thing that I would tell people, if you're going to do a horror, make sure you check this out, because it does a really good job of making you interested in the monster. Yeah.
And the fact that you're not going into a typical, even we did breeds and we did other things like that, and it's the stereotypical werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
And they might change the story, and they might, but here's a guy, you got bitten by a lichen and you turn into a lichen, and this is totally different. It has nothing, it's its own species.
They do their This is a great example too of like, you can take things that have been done before, and then you can make it absolutely your own.
Yeah, and just to think about it, I mean, think about just the way that we are, and you have the Mandela effect and all these different things like that. We accept this for what it is, and this is what we've been told, and this is the story we've been told. And it's funny that a book that's, when was it written? Something.
That sounds right. I mean, I guess it'd be whenever the Bronx was going through burning buildings.
So you have someone that took the story and just made it his own. And he could have went anywhere that he wanted to, and what typically people would do. And they think that the original aspect that the writer is writing is that it's in a nuclear holocaust, or the original aspect is you could be half werewolf. The original aspect, and they're changing it, but not really changing it.
Mm-hmm.
This guy changed it, where it's like what you believe is because this, not the other way around.
And that's always something I love seeing in a fantasy.
That was
awesome. Story. Now, do you want to talk a little bit about the movie and your feelings on it as an adaptation?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, there's a book called Clan of the Cave Bear, and I forgot who was playing the role. But that movie was really bad during the 70s. And this movie was really bad, I think, just because they didn't have the ability to do what the book wanted it to do. Yeah,
and again, like it's such a tough situation because it's like when he growls to communicate this, and it's like what are you supposed to do with that for a visual media?
And they did the baby thing, and then all of a sudden, and they put this whole thing where they show the wolves moving, and you're like, oh wow, exciting. And then at the end, they show themselves, and they're just regular wolves, and you're like,
well, now that I'm thinking about it, not even CGI, like would it not just be better to get like maybe some like mini stilts and have people crawling around in really good makeup?
I don't know, because I mean, if you think about it, they were like, dude, how fast they were. They could climb, they could jump.
Also, it's a great setup for CGI because like when they jump and climb, they're in the shadows, so you don't have to have it like broad daylight CGI either. And
then the one guy actually sees it. The scientist.
Yeah, so you get your big shot that like, the trailer ruins and
and it's like it's like they're mistaken for dogs, but they see the snout and it almost like a smile kind of in the teeth and so they describe it as it could be mistaken from afar, but not up close.
Yeah, I think the way it was expressed too, or the way I took it is, if you saw that, in the dark in a dark alley, you'd probably go, "What was that? That was probably a dog."
Right.
You wouldn't go, I was able to see this, and this. It is just like, when you're driving and you see like a thing, like, was that a person? Oh no, that was a street. That happens all the time.
And it's funny because they kind of did the Jurassic Park before the Jurassic Park, where the part where he's looking at the raptors and the raptor comes on the side. Where in it the guy sees something and they're like, what the heck is that? And they're like even explaining that it took him that little bit of time as his throat's getting ripped out.
But by the way, pretty the deaths are very realistic too, which I really like in anything.
But they would do it to make minimum noise, maximum amount of damage. Yeah, so it's like, I think it was just really well done. And I think we should look at maybe some other books that he's written.
Well, I looked into it a little, and it seems like this author he likes tackling just different supernatural elements. Because when I saw, he's like, oh, this one's about aliens, this one's about this.
Well, see, that'd be interesting.
So we might start exploring that, especially if we're gonna cover an alien thing, we want to pair it with something. Yeah. It seems like he likes tackling and doing his interpretation of because I saw one with aliens. It wasn't called Alien and like Wolfen, but he does a version of that, and so it's like, okay, so here's him. I want to see this author's interpretation of all these like fantasy things. And I'm like, oh, are they going to take place in the same setting?
I don't know.
Is it like is cool. The alien one going to take place in the world where Wolfen happened?
Oh, that'd be interesting. But I highly recommend I know that I recommend everything that we put out there.
We'll eventually get to stuff that we don't recommend.
But I'm sure there's going to be a time where I'm going to be like, no, not really. But it's a nice, easy read, and it's not too difficult, and it's not too hard to follow, and you'll get a great idea, even though you're hearing it from us, the different ideas on the different perspectives from both sides, and write us and let us know, because I would love to hear other people's opinion, because like I said, I even told you the book you didn't know because it's an older book. So when I mention it, people are like, what is that? And like I said, it's a good book.
Yeah, very
good book. And like right now, I mean, you could either go to
on Audible, you physical book.
Yeah, physical book. Can't say where.
There's other ways you can acquire audiobooks.
There's other ways.
Just searching it onto,
Yeah.
You know what's funny is I was on YouTube the other day.
Oh, I go on YouTube a lot.
Is it? You go on YouTube? That's funny how unrelated those two things that we've said
are. Yeah, because one's video and one's not. But I'm on YouTube a lot.
Yeah. And you've said you've been getting into a lot of audiobooks too.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't know what to... yeah. I just thought it'd be fun if we said two things that were unrelated.
Yeah, totally unrelated. I don't even know if you could do that.
And I found out, and this is a thing too, like some people they'll do their own audiobooks and just upload them.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Now, I haven't done anything with that information.
I've heard of that, where they'll read the whole book.
Yeah.
And some of them will show a video as it's playing. I've just heard that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just wanted to talk about things that we've heard of or like that are unrelated.
Yeah. Or the craziest place is your local library. Believe it or not, your local library has a lot of audiobook. That's how I used to listen to them back on tapes, CDs. Before that, Pigeon. But
you know what? If we're actually talking about there's Libby, and there's actually official like audio like plays. I just found out you can actually like local libraries provide like audiobook functions.
Correct.
Also, it's still crazy to me that I could go to a library and just read a book and not pay for it at all.
Yes, and some of like the audio aspect of it, you can get through the library online. You don't got to go into the library, and they have a lot of good ones. Now, if you go to a library, I think they probably still have the same function where you might have a book that's not an audiobook that's not in Ontario, but in Rialto. And they'll actually get it from Rialto, bring it to Ontario, so you can listen to cassettes or CDs from other places, which is really neat.
Yeah, it has been. I'm really glad I got a warehouse job when I discovered like how many just resources there are for entertainment that I'm like, if I tell people like I've read a book, that's somehow, people, that's more respectable to people, even though I'm like,
I know.
Well, I didn't. Also now I'm like, well, I didn't even read it, but
I know. But but look at it as a story.
Yeah, there's so many interesting stories that I'm like, especially like Wolfen is like, I've never heard of one of the best like horror stories out there.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, well, there was an adaptation. They didn't adapt it right from what you've said. So it's like all these stories that some people will never know about if they don't even, because I didn't know about all these resources for entertainment that will be in the description below.
Well, like I said, I'm going to be bringing probably a lot of some of those older books that maybe you guys have never even read. Like I said, Clan of the Cave Bear or the Mammoth Hunters, all these different ones that I read when I was younger or I listened to. Now, let's get into the listening and reading, because in the end, some people they have the graphic audio, the performance in your mind, movie in your mind.
Yeah, a movie. I can't.
Movie in your mind.
Graphic audio is if you're making big warehouse money, spend it on it. It's worth it. Especially for bigger books like what Brandon Sanderson will write.
Yeah,
it's actually way easier to keep track of the story when you get like actors and sound effects saying it.
Yes. Like Planet Hulk, I just listened to.
Oh yeah, I forgot they do like a comic book storylines.
Comic books too.
How was that?
Planet Hulk, Wolverine. It's good. It's really good. Yeah, I listened to it, and then after that, I got on YouTube.
Just for fun, just to do something else.
Fun, yeah. But it's a fun way to listen to a book Now I would highly recommend, if you really want to, if you listen to a book like that and it's great and you don't mind the not having the voices, then I highly recommend you reading it like unabridged, because if you can handle the author reading it, because there's some things that I find that it loses a little bit. I mean, it's great to have the explosions and the bullets and all that stuff.
That is it is a drawback of graphic audio that they are abridged. They do cut stuff out. I remember there was a section in a story where in the book specifically, one of the key elements happening is a guy is trying to remember a song. And he remembers it, and he tells it to this lady, and she's like, "What's that song?" He's like, "Oh, that's the song that played when we first met." Graphic audio. I was like, I'm buying this graphic audio just for that scene, because he like
cut it out,
because he pays the guy like, play this song. He's like, now I remember, and then they don't include it at all in graphic audio,
right.
And I was just like, oh man,
yeah.
Again, it's absolutely worth the money, but I am kind of like, I guess audiobooks are straight adaptions,
right?
At least usually.
And some of the ones like Stephen King, the Dark Tower, and some of those books, amazing. And he's the one that narrates them, so which is like amazing.
I saw that. I was like, that can't be true.
That's true. And so it depends. There's so much. There's something for everybody. And the biggest thing is I just want to stop the whole, oh, you didn't read it. It's funny. People will say, oh, you didn't read it. And you're thinking, when's the last time you read a book, dude?
Yeah. I also like that. Yeah. It was like, I mean, I've experienced like 100 books. Now I've read like 2, but like, and they're like, yeah, you're not, that doesn't count as reading. And like,
I think it does. Cause you can watch a movie and the same thing. They'll quote National Geographic. Well, you didn't go out there and study the lion. I mean, to me, I think it's better than a movie. You get more out of it. Unabridged books are great. And for me, I think it's don't let people make you feel bad about it, because in the end, what are they doing? It's not like they're picking up War and Peace or picking up something like that and reading it, and you're getting so much more. There's so many stories. And there's so many things that it's so endless, and when Cody asked me to do this show,
begged him to be specific.
I've been doing this for years and I never had a problem with it. But if you saw me in the beginning, all those Deathlands books, I physically read those. So I've done both, and it doesn't for me, it doesn't matter if I have a warehouse job or I'm driving to Indio twice a night. You know what? There's only so much. I hate not to mess with anybody. There's almost so much music that I could listen to.
It's so funny that I have not listened to the radio in 2 years.
That totally makes sense.
I got my headphones, and I'm like, anytime I'm not watching a movie, it means I am listening to an audiobook.
Oh, it totally makes sense.
I started getting this sense of worker's pride, because I do feel that audiobooks are the working man's entertainment.
Yeah.
Especially for a warehouse job. It's like the opportunity that you have in a job where you get to listen to headphones. You can take learning courses. You get to basically just partake in a movie, a 40-hour movie that no one else has the time for, because at their job they can't do that.
Yeah.
The commute to work, sometimes I'm like, well, it's going to take an hour and a half to get home. Well, I'll be able to finish up this part of the story. I'll be able to do that. I look forward to I look forward to not being home and just watching something now. Right.
And you can listen to a book by Bob Mazie on how to listen. That audiobook.
I believe
everyone's gonna be looking at Bob Mazie,
because Audible, people have issues with Amazon, rightfully so, but they do. I really think that the opportunity that it gives people, because they'll do sales where it's just we're doing a sale 2 for 1 for just courses. So they're we're doing a sale. You can buy 3 courses, I got here's a book on how to write fiction, how to I got one book on just the best dystopian and utopian works of fiction and the history of it.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's just It is like all of this is just being like given to me for like $5. I got 3 courses on like how to better appreciate fiction, how to better understand even what utopian and dystopian is.
Yeah, and there's so many. I mean, believe it or not, well, I'm sure you know because you're watching the show, but you know, it's so much more. When I first started listening to audiobooks, I had 3 different libraries: Rialto, Ontario, and I think Pomona. And I listened to everything they had. They didn't have a lot back then. So I listened to everything they had, the Sphere and all these different things. And then I started listening to classics, Moby Dick, Pretty Little Women, all that stuff. And then, you know, there wasn't many places that you can get. I mean, unless I went to another library. So, you know, I was reading books too at the same time. Now, I mean, I went in probably about 7 years ago to Ontario Library, and there's a whole wall and a half of audiobooks. And it was blown away on the stuff that they had.
Yeah, do they have because I know Audible has like the Pimsleur language learning courses on there, which I got like the CD, like the whole course is like $150. And
they'll have stuff like that there.
And it's like at a library, and it's like, I was like, oh, I paid a lot of money for this, and I could have just rented it at a library. And like, it's not even like these are like the courses for learning these things.
Yeah,
and you just get them for free.
Yeah. So I mean, but you guys all know that, and you know, I definitely would love to hear, you know, people you know, commenting, because for me, I take pride in that I listen to these books. And you and all you should too, because if not, what else would you be doing? I mean, really. So someone that sits there and says, "Oh, you read the book, that doesn't count." BS. It does count, because it's the knowledge that you're learning and you're doing. How would you even know about breeds? How would you even know about all these authors and what they write? So, what is that person reading? What if you said, "Hey, how many books have you read?" I guarantee it wouldn't be massive. It might be. You might be running into someone that reads everything. But the majority of the time, the people that say you're not reading, their stack of reading compared to what you've listened to is minute.
Yeah, and you can really maximize your mind. I'm a little more dramatic than how I mean it, but you really can just like absolutely. I want to read all of the classic fiction. You could do that in 1 week of work if you're allowed to listen to headphones. You could go through and just find out about all these classics easily while you're being paid at work.
And the classics are, like I said, some of them are not tough listens, but I mean, you got to realize it's a different time. You know, was written a little bit different, and things of that nature.
The only classic that I found I do not like is Stranger in a Strange Land.
You know, I haven't read that.
The first third of it is great, and I really would tell people after the pool scene, you stop reading it, you stop listening. After that, it becomes a complete. But I thought it was the most amazing sci-fi story I'd ever experienced, and then the rest of the book, I was just going like, when are you going to go back to? Yeah. Everything else, Tom Sawyer, it was like funny still. Huckleberry Finn, I liked. Don Quixote is hilarious. Like so many classics actually hold up, which is like I just assumed they wouldn't.
And I even told you guys 2 years before the Mast. That's a good one. And why I like that one is because it's not. I mean, it's a real. I mean, this guy actually did this. So, but you know, I mean, this is how crazy I get. Not that you want to know, but I'm just gonna let you know. I mean, right now I'm listening to. I just finished Planet Hulk, so I'm listening to. John dies at the end, right? I re-listened to Wolfen for probably my 7th time. And as I'm listening to that, I was listening to Phase 2, Marvel. I also listened to Wolverine. And all in like a week. Oh, and I've been going through probably every zombie series, that you could listen to. Yeah. And then after that, I go on.
For no reason.
Yeah.
I like I got to a point, and it is like getting into audiobooks at all, like you do feel your brain kind of rewiring itself to like let you multitask. and then you can feel like, oh yeah, now I can work while paying attention. I started like playing video games. I'll listen to audiobooks. And I am just like, if anyone tells me I'm wasting my time, it's like, look, I just went through like 6 books.
You're multitasking.
Yeah, I just consumed, well, I didn't, but like maybe I consumed Moby Dick, you know? One of us is partaking in the stories of the greats and maybe playing some RPGs.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that sentence could have been structured a little bit different. But
wasn't the best.
No.
Wasn't the best I've done.
I can't even think of another book that even comes close to what you just said. But
we're going to wrap it up soon.
Yeah. But I know back to our main book. So I know we went off on a thing cuz to me I want to make sure everyone knows that it's okay.
It's weird that it's an issue.
Yeah, it's just weird. It's an issue. It's okay, to be able to do that. I mean, you're listening to all sorts of stuff that you definitely don't have the time to read. And it's still a good thing. It's still good. And like I said, these are one of those books. Wolfen is one of those books that is actually, it's not a heavy read. It's not, the Oculus or anything. It's a short book, but it's good.
It's a great going for a walk book too.
Yeah,
just like I started walking now because I'm like I need stuff to do.
Just not in a dog park.
Yes,
that would kind of freak me out.
Just start looking at some suspicious dogs.
Yeah, but I highly recommend it. I think that you guys should. And we're gonna, stay tuned. We got a lot of cool stuff, ideas coming up. For you guys, and want to hear your guys' input. And I hope you go out and listen to or
acquire in some way
Wolfen, and you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, I think
so that's the end
of that chapter.